"Mom, we just want a peaceful wedding. Without you there." Those words still echo in my ears. I stood there frozen, my breath caught halfway in my throat, gripping the edge of the marble countertop as my daughter, my only child, looked me in the eye and said that I wasn't welcome at her wedding. I paid for that wedding. Every cent of it. My name is Eleanor Davis. I'm 62 years old, retired from teaching after nearly 35 years, and I always thought I raised my daughter Amanda right. I wasn't a perfect mother, but I gave her everything I had. She was a bright child, full of questions and mischief. Her father, Robert, left us when Amanda was barely 10. He remarried within a year, started a new family. I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and make sure Amanda never felt like she was missing anything. There were days I skipped meals so she could have enough. I never wanted her to feel the abandonment that haunted me. When Amanda got into college, I sold the last piece of jewelry my mother left me to pay for her books. When she wanted to study abroad in Italy for a semester, I took out a loan, one I just finished paying off last year. I always believed sacrifices were part of love. That's what mothers do. When she met Daniel, I was happy for her. He was charming, ambitious, and came from a well-off family. Amanda's eyes sparkled when she talked about him. I noticed how she began dressing more expensively, her tone changing slightly, her standards rising. But I chalked it up to her finally having comfort and security, something I could never truly give her. They got engaged in the spring. Amanda called me, squealing with joy. "Mom, he proposed. And his parents are throwing an engagement party next weekend." I was so proud, so honored. She even asked if I could help her plan the wedding, which of course I said yes to without hesitation. "I want a garden wedding with lilies and soft jazz," she told me, flipping through bridal magazines. I smiled and said, "We'll make it beautiful, sweetheart." I didn't think about the cost at first. I just wanted her to be happy. I offered to pay. Not out of obligation but because it felt right. A way to show her how proud I was. Amanda didn't object. She started sending me ideas. A $3,000 cake, a live quartet, designer dresses for the bridal party. Times I winced at the bills. But I paid them. Quietly. Even when it meant dipping into my retirement savings. Daniel's parents barely contributed. They sent over a list of 70 guests and offered to coordinate logistics. I brushed it off. I didn't care about that. I only cared that my daughter had the day of her dreams. But something shifted about 2 months before the wedding. Amanda started replying less often. She stopped asking for my opinion. I heard more and more from Daniel's mother, Caroline, a woman with a honeyed voice and razor-sharp eyes. She began taking over decisions Amanda and I had discussed. One day, I showed up at a bridal boutique to surprise Amanda with a fitting I'd booked. The assistant looked confused. "Oh, Amanda came last week with Caroline. They chose something else." No call. No message. I sat in my car afterward for nearly an hour, staring at the rain dancing on the windshield. I told myself she was just busy. Stressed. Wedding planning is overwhelming, right? But then came the bridal shower. I wasn't invited. Amanda said it was just something her friends were doing. She said it was no big deal. No big deal. I whispered into the phone. "Amanda, I paid for everything. Why didn't you tell me?" "Mom," she sighed. "You make everything about money. This is supposed to be fun. Don't ruin it." I sat in silence, stunned. My heart cracked a little that day. But I still held out hope. Maybe the stress of the big day was clouding her judgment. Maybe things would be better after the wedding. Then, a week before the ceremony, the final blow came. I received an email. Not a call. Not a face-to-face conversation. An email from Amanda. "Hi, Mom. Daniel and I have decided that it's best to keep the wedding small and intimate. With so many different dynamics at play, we feel it would be less stressful if you didn't attend. Please don't take it personally. We're so grateful for all your support. Love, Amanda." I remember reading it over and over, like maybe the words would rearrange into something else. Something that made sense. Called her, no answer. I drove to her apartment. She wouldn't buzz me in. Finally, Daniel came down to the lobby. His eyes were cold. Eleanor, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I paid for the venue, the food, the dress. Choke. I gave everything I had. Daniel didn't flinch. Yes, and that was generous. But Amanda's mental health is fragile right now. We all just want peace. They were using that word to cut me out of the most important day of my daughter's life. I drove home in silence. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed picture of Amanda on her high school graduation day. In a cap and gown I paid for, with a smile I once knew. I replayed everything in my mind. Every lunch packed, every tear wiped, every dollar given. And in that moment something inside me broke. I thought I was doing what mothers were supposed to do. But somewhere along the way I had become invisible, disposable, and all I could do was sit there, trying to understand how love could be so blind. I didn't leave the house for 3 days after that. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't know how to be in a world that didn't include my daughter anymore. The silence in my home felt louder than it ever had. Every corner whispered memories. Amanda coloring on the kitchen floor while I cooked, her laughter echoing down the hallway during sleepovers, the sound of her heels clacking down the steps on prom night. I thought of calling my sister Janine, but we hadn't spoken in over a year. She always said I spoiled Amanda too much. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak, Elle, she warned me. Kids need boundaries, not bottomless love. But love was the only thing I had to give. And now, I was left with nothing but bruised memories and mounting bills. A week passed. The wedding came and went. I saw the photos on Facebook. Amanda beamed in her designer gown, the one I paid for. Daniel stood beside her, smug and polished. Caroline, his mother, was in nearly every shot. She looked like the mother of the bride. I wasn't even mentioned in the captions. Not a single word. My heart cracked open all over again. Still I said nothing. I didn't post. I didn't message Amanda. I didn't beg. But what truly broke me was what came next. 2 weeks after the wedding I got a letter in the mail. Not a thank you card. Not an apology. Bill. From the wedding planner. An additional $4,275. Unpaid charges. Apparently, Amanda had added last-minute items. Specialty cocktail servers, imported orchids, a firework display. And she gave them my name for final billing. I couldn't breathe. I called the planner immediately. I'm sorry, Mrs. Davis, but your daughter said you were handling all expenses. We had that in writing. I felt a slow, burning rage begin to bubble. Amanda hadn't just cut me out. She'd left me holding the bill for a party I wasn't even invited to. Called her shaking. This time she picked up. Mom, she said, voice cool. Is this about the invoice? Yes, Amanda. This is about the invoice. How could you? Mom, don't make this dramatic. The planner said it was minor. I figured you wouldn't mind. You figured I wouldn't mind paying for fireworks at a wedding I was banned from attending? She sighed. You're twisting this. Daniel and I made a decision for our peace. It wasn't meant to hurt you. But it did hurt me. You used me. There was a pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. You offered to pay, Mom. You said it yourself. Whatever you need, Amanda. Well, I needed this. And you gave it. So what's the issue now? I was silent. Son. You sound ungrateful, she added. Maybe you should talk to someone. She hung up. Ungrateful. That word clanged around in my mind like a hammer in a cathedral. That night, I opened a bottle of red wine I'd been saving since Amanda graduated college. I poured a glass and sat on the back porch, staring out at the empty garden. I remembered the little girl who used to pick dandelions and call them fairy wishes. Where had she gone? Was she ever really mine? The following week I went to the grocery store. A neighbor approached me at the checkout line. Eleanor, I saw Amanda's wedding pictures. Just lovely. I bet you're so proud. I smiled faintly. Yes, it was beautiful. Oh, you must be over the moon. All those orchids. She said on Instagram her mother-in-law handled everything so perfectly. My smile dropped. Caroline did. Oh yes, that woman's amazing. Amanda said she stepped in when things got complicated with her side of the family. That was when I realized. Amanda hadn't just removed me from the wedding. She'd rewritten the story. In her version, I didn't even exist. That night, I dug out an old box of keepsakes from the attic. Baby shoes. Crayon drawings. The first Mother's Day card Amanda ever made, with uneven letters that read, "I love you more than the stars." I held it in my lap and wept. This wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. I hadn't lost a daughter. I'd been erased from her life like a smudge on glass. But in all that pain, a thought began to form. Faint, shaky, like the flicker of a match in the dark. Maybe this wasn't about what she'd done. Maybe it was about what I had allowed. I thought back to every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I handed over money without asking questions. Every time I smiled through humiliation, telling myself that love was enough. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a hard question. Who am I if I'm not Amanda's mother? What have I given up for someone who clearly never planned to give anything back? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list just for me. It was simple. Call the bank. Cancel the rest of Amanda's credit access. Speak to a lawyer about the wedding expenses. Start therapy. Visit Janine. My hands trembled as I wrote each item. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something like clarity. Maybe even power. Because while Amanda may have cut me out of her big day, I was finally starting to realize I didn't have to keep cutting myself out of my own life. I stood in line at the bank with my palms sweating. My name was still tied to Amanda's emergency fund account, the one I'd set up back when she started college, thinking it would be used for textbooks or car repairs. It had since been drained for things like spa retreats, designer heels, and now wedding fireworks. The teller smiled politely. "How can I help you today?" I swallowed hard. "I need to close a joint account." There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Concern, maybe pity, as she asked, "Would you like to notify the co-holder?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm done notifying people who stopped caring long ago." Felt like slicing through invisible cords. Every click of the keyboard was like a snip from the scissors of my own awakening. Next I sat with a lawyer. A no-nonsense woman named Camille with sharp glasses and an even sharper mind. "I just want to know if there's any legal recourse," I told her. "I paid for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. They charged things without my consent. They used my identity to secure vendor agreements." She nodded, flipping through my neatly bound receipts and printouts. "You technically have a case," she said. "You weren't just generous. You were exploited." That word, exploited, landed in my chest like a gavel. "I don't necessarily want to sue my daughter," I said, voice trembling. "But I do want to stop bleeding for people who keep wounding me." Camille leaned back. "Then maybe this is about more than a lawsuit. Maybe it's about boundaries." That night I sent Amanda one final message. "Effective immediately. All financial support is terminated. You've crossed a line I can't pretend doesn't exist. I wish you peace, but I am stepping away. Don't contact me for money again." She read it within 10 minutes. No reply. I stared at that little scene checkmark like it was a verdict. And maybe it was. The silence was her answer. But I wasn't broken by it. Not anymore. A week later, I visited my sister Janine. We hadn't spoken much in years, mostly because I couldn't stand how direct she was. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't nod politely when I made excuses for Amanda. So when she opened her door and saw me standing there, she looked more shocked than anything. "I didn't expect this," she said. "I didn't either," I replied. "But I think I need someone to tell me I'm not crazy." Janine stepped aside and let me in. Her living room still smelled like lemon polish and peppermint tea. Comfort smells from childhood. I told her everything. The wedding. The exclusion. A bill. The erasure. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she reached out, took my hand, and said something I hadn't heard in months. "You didn't deserve that, Elle. You were a good mom. But you don't owe her your soul." I cried hard, shaking sobs that left me breathless. Maybe I'd been waiting to hear those exact words. Over the next few days, I began sorting through everything Amanda had ever asked me to keep in storage. Boxes of old college notes, designer handbags, even an unopened box labeled Daniel's gaming stuff. I called a local shelter for women starting over and asked if they accepted donations. When the young volunteer arrived, she looked surprised at the quality of the items. "This is all going?" she asked. I smiled faintly. It never really belonged here in the first place. Letting go felt good. Powerful. I even began therapy, real therapy. Not the kind where you cry for an hour and leave feeling worse. The kind where someone looks at you and says, "Let's figure out why you keep giving your heart to people who don't return the favor." I learned that I had spent decades being the fixer, the giver, the pleaser. Because if I kept everyone happy, maybe they'd never leave me. But Amanda had left. And it didn't destroy me. One night, as I sat journaling on my porch, I received a message. It was from Caroline, Daniel's mother. "Eleanor, I know this situation has been difficult. Amanda has struggled a lot emotionally. I hope with time things can heal. We didn't intend to hurt you. I just wanted to say thank you for all you did." The wedding was perfect. Perfect. A word I once would have clung to. Now it felt hollow. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But that message told me everything I needed to know. They saw me as a wallet with feelings they could ignore. But I was no longer willing to be invisible. A few days later I went to the lake. Alone. It was a place Amanda and I used to visit when she was small. We'd feed the ducks, lie on a blanket, and stare up at the clouds, naming their shapes. I sat on the same bench we used to share. The water shimmered with sunlight. The wind carried the scent of pine and possibility. And I let myself grieve. Not just the loss of Amanda, but the loss of who I used to be. The woman who thought love could buy loyalty. The woman who bent until she broke. The woman who would rather bleed quietly than speak up. I buried her at that lake. Not with bitterness, but with peace. Because a new version of me was beginning to bloom. One who understood that love without respect isn't love at all. One who would never again fund her own betrayal. A month passed. A strange calm settled over me. Not happiness, not quite peace, but clarity. I was beginning to see Amanda and myself, without the fog of motherhood clouding my judgment. But clarity has a cost. One afternoon I received a call from Ruth, an old family friend. We hadn't spoken since Amanda's bridal shower. She'd helped me plan it, back when I still believed that kindness could hold broken people together. "Eleanor," she said, her voice hesitant, "there's something I think you should know. I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but it's about the wedding." My heart sank. "Go ahead." Well, I was at the reception. I didn't want to be, honestly, not after everything you told me. But I'd already RSVP'd. And they told everyone a different story. "What kind of story?" asked slowly. "They said you refused to come. That you were angry about Daniel being from a better family and that you tried to cancel the wedding out of jealousy. Amanda said you called her selfish and ungrateful, and then cut her off before the big day." I felt the blood rush from my face. They told people I refused to come. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I couldn't sit with it. It was lies. Everyone was whispering about you like you were this bitter, dramatic mother. They even made jokes. Someone called you the ATM with an attitude." My breath caught in my throat. An ATM with an attitude. That was the punchline at the wedding I paid for. I hung up the phone, shaking. The betrayal wasn't just exclusion. It wasn't just the bill. It was the complete rewriting of who I was. They didn't just erase me. They turned me into a villain. I sat on the kitchen floor for hours. I couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I felt like a hollowed-out shell of myself. I thought about all the hours I worked overtime as a nurse. How I skipped vacations. How I used my retirement savings to help Amanda get through college after her financial aid fell through. And in return, I got painted as a resentful, bitter woman, jealous of my own daughter's happiness. It was the final knife in the back. The last straw. I printed every receipt I had. The venue deposit, the catering agreement, the floral invoice, the dress fittings, the invoice Amanda sent me through the planner. Over $28,000 in total. I organized them into a neat folder and mailed it. Not to Amanda. To Caroline. Attached was a single note. If I'm the villain, then let's not pretend I was your benefactor. From now on, I expect to be treated like the stranger you made me out to be. Tell your guests who really paid for that fantasy. You're welcome. I mailed a second copy to Amanda. No note. Just the folder. I didn't need to say a word. That night my phone rang twice. Once from Amanda. Once from Daniel. I let them go to voicemail. I didn't bother listening. They weren't calling out of guilt. They were calling because their golden lie had cracked. The next morning, something even more surreal happened. I got a message from a girl I didn't know. Sarah, one of Amanda's old friends from high school. Hi, Mrs. Davis. I hope this isn't overstepping, but I just wanted to say I saw your Facebook post from 2019 where you wrote about working overtime to save for Amanda's future. I remember her always bragging that her mom would give her the world if she asked. I saw the wedding photos, and when people started saying you refused to go, it didn't make sense. I just want you to know. Some of us don't believe her version. Some of us remember who you are. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Someone remembered. Someone saw me. And in that moment, I realized something vital. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was just finally seeing people and myself for what we really were. Amanda wasn't a child anymore. She was a grown woman who had made a series of selfish choices. No. I was not the villain. I was the only person who ever stood between her and rock bottom. And now I was stepping aside. Later that week I finally posted something of my own. Just a single photo. A baby Amanda asleep on my chest, wrapped in a blanket. The caption read, "I gave everything I had. Sometimes that still isn't enough. And that's okay. Because I'm enough, even when I'm standing alone." It wasn't spite. It wasn't revenge. It was release. I turned off notifications. I made myself a quiet dinner. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's afterthought. I felt like someone who'd found the edge of her own worth, and refused to step past it again. The next few days were a strange mix of silence and noise. Silence from Amanda. Not a word since I sent the receipts. No apology. No attempt to explain or make amends. And noise from everyone else. Old friends started reaching out after seeing the photo I posted. Some wrote private messages. Some commented publicly. And not one of them questioned my decision to step away. "You were always too generous," one woman said. "I remember you giving Amanda your old car while you still took the bus," another commented. "You deserve better. You always did." It was like a quiet tide rising up behind me. Not a rescue, but a recognition. People were finally seeing me. Or maybe I was finally letting them. Even Janine, my sister, started texting me regularly again. We'd send each other old photos, recipes, little jokes. One afternoon she sent me a picture of us as kids, standing in the backyard barefoot, faces smeared with watermelon. "I remember how you used to hold my hand during storms," she wrote. "You're still that strong. Just in a different storm now." I saved that message. Read it 3 times. But not everything was kind. Caroline sent me a long email. "I wish you had handled things privately. Now people are confused and talking. Amanda is devastated. You embarrassed her. This should have been between mother and daughter." I stared at her words like they were acid on paper. Privately. As if silence had ever protected me. As if swallowing the betrayal would have somehow made it more polite. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had already started my own kind of reply. Not in words, but in action. First, I reached out to the planner Amanda had used. The same one who had sent me invoices using my name and email without approval. I politely informed her that my legal counsel was reviewing the documents, that she was never authorized to use my name in contracts, and that I expected her to remove me from any future correspondence related to Amanda's affairs. She apologized immediately, said she had just followed Amanda's instructions and assumed it was fine. Please, I wrote back, never assume again when someone else's money is involved. Then I contacted the last remaining joint account Amanda had access to, an old investment account I had opened in her name when she was 16. It had been left untouched for years. About $12,000, meant for her future college, a down payment, maybe even her honeymoon. But I closed it, cashed it out. I donated it, every cent, to a foundation for women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. I never told Amanda, never bragged. I just did it because that money no longer belonged to her. It belonged to a future that never arrived. A future where I was respected, where I was invited, where love wasn't a transaction. And as I watched that donation go through, I felt something warm in my chest. Not pride, not vengeance, something cleaner. It was freedom. Later that month, I made an appointment with a realtor. I'd been living in the same house for over 30 years. Every corner held a memory. Amanda's first steps in the hallway, her prom photos by the fireplace, the spot in the kitchen where she used to sneak cookies behind my back. But the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a shrine to someone who had stopped visiting long ago. So I sold it. I packed only what I needed: my books, my garden tools, and the quilt my mother made me the year Amanda was born. I moved 2 hours away, to a quiet coastal town where no one knew my name and I could walk on the beach without wondering who was whispering behind my back. My new place was small. Just 2 bedrooms. One for me, one for peace. The first night I slept there, I woke up to the sound of rain and realized I hadn't cried in weeks. Not once. I was still grieving, yes. Still aching sometimes. But I was no longer breaking. Then one morning, as I sipped tea by my new window, I got an unexpected visitor. Janine. She had driven out to surprise me. I figured you'd need someone to help you hang pictures, she said, holding a hammer and a mischievous grin. We laughed like we hadn't in years. Talked for hours. Cooked dinner together. Real food. Not takeout eaten alone on the couch like the year before. When she left, she hugged me tightly. You're not just getting your life back, she whispered. You're building a better one. She was right. Because little by little, I was choosing myself again. I planted herbs in the backyard. Joined a book club. Started sketching again. A hobby I hadn't touched since Amanda was in middle school. I met my neighbors. One of them, Doris, was a widow who kept giving me fresh-baked scones. Just because. Another, Miguel, showed me how to fix my leaky faucet without calling a plumber. People were kind. And they didn't want anything from me. And then, something happened I never expected. I found a letter in my mailbox. It wasn't from Amanda. Not directly. It was from Daniel. Mrs. Davis. Sorry. I didn't know what Amanda was saying about you until after the wedding. She told me you were refusing to come because of me. That you never liked me. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But after everything that's come out, I think I owe you an apology. Thank you for everything. And I'm sorry we didn't see you clearly until it was too late. I sat on my porch for a long time after that, the letter trembling in my hands. And all I could think was, too late doesn't mean never. But it also doesn't mean I have to go back. T's strange, the moment you realize you're no longer waiting. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for the phone to ring. Waiting for someone to finally understand just how much they hurt you. That moment doesn't come with fireworks or some great release. Just happens. For me, it was a Tuesday morning. I was planting rosemary in my little garden. The soil was damp. The air smelled like salt and lavender. A sparrow landed on the fence post and watched me as I worked, unbothered, like we'd known each other forever. And it hit me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't holding my breath for Amanda to come around. I wasn't hoping that she'd show up on my doorstep sobbing, begging to undo what she did. I wasn't planning conversations in my head or replaying old ones with different endings. Had let go. That was my peace. A few weeks later, Amanda did send a letter. It was short, handwritten. Mom, I don't know what to say that would make a difference. I've been selfish. Hurt you. I was so wrapped up in my own life that I didn't see what I was doing. Daniel told me he wrote to you. I didn't even know he had until afterward. I think that's when I realized. I've turned into someone I wouldn't have wanted to be raised by. Sorry. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted to say it. Amanda. I stared at the letter for a long time. There was no manipulation in it. No excuses. And that meant something. But it didn't undo what came before. It didn't put me back in the wedding photos. It didn't return the $28,000 or the years I spent shrinking myself to fit in Amanda's world. It didn't change the months of silence, or the lies told to family and friends. Still, I placed the letter in a box, alongside my mother's quilt, my favorite photos, and a few drawings I'd done recently. One of a tree in winter, still standing tall though all its leaves had fallen. I never wrote back. I didn't need to. Forgiveness isn't always about reconnecting. Sometimes it's about releasing someone from your spirit, so they no longer get to live rent-free in your wounds. And with that letter read and folded away, I moved on. Really moved on. I started volunteering at a local shelter that helped women and children fleeing abusive homes. I didn't talk much about my story, but I listened. And the more I listened, the more I realized how many women like me were walking around every day with open wounds nobody could see. Women who had given everything and ended up empty. Women whose kindness had been mistaken for weakness, again and again, until they forgot who they were. So I started a small support group. Just 6 of us, meeting on Sunday afternoons at the library. We called it Still Standing. That first meeting, I looked around and saw women in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. All of us bruised by different storms but still showing up. Still hoping. Still fighting. Still healing. And somehow, that gave me more joy than I'd ever felt watching Amanda walk across a graduation stage or cut a wedding cake. I had built something from the rubble. One night, as I was leaving the library, I ran into Miguel, my neighbor who'd fixed my faucet. He held up a thermos. "Chamomile," he said. "Thought you might want to join me for a walk." We strolled through the neighborhood as the sun went down, sipping tea and talking about nothing in particular. His wife had passed years ago. We didn't talk about that much. But we understood each other. 2 people learning to live again, slowly. Eventually we began walking every week. Then dinner once in a while. Then the holidays came, and instead of sitting alone with a microwave meal and memories of the past, I found myself laughing at Miguel's jokes, helping his granddaughter decorate cookies, and holding hands by the fireplace. It wasn't love like in the movies. It was quieter, gentler. But it was real. And it was mine. Now, I wake up in a house that smells like herbs and fresh coffee. I go to my garden. Call Janine every Saturday. Paint. Walk. Breathe. And I don't flinch every time the phone rings. Amanda hasn't called. She might never. And that's okay. Because I'm no longer chasing a version of motherhood that required me to be invisible. I'm no longer financing my own humiliation, or begging to be seen. I see myself now. I was the one who held her through every fever, scraped knee and heartbreak. I was the one who gave without ever expecting a receipt. And I was the one left outside the tent of a wedding I paid for. Not because I was unloved, but because I was unappreciated. There's a difference. And once you see it, you never go back. To the women watching this, the ones who feel forgotten, discarded, erased, I want you to hear me. You are not the villain in your family's fairy tale. You are the author of your own story. And if they cut you out of the picture, make your own frame. Hang it proudly. Live fully. Because you still matter. Even if no one claps. Even if no one says thank you. You still matter. And that is something no betrayal, no lie, no wedding can ever take away from you.